Good evening, witches, warlocks, sorcerers, and adepts, to another episode of Knights of the Nephilim podcast. As always, I will be your tour guide on this mysterious and mystical journey that we call Magick. I am Frater Crow, and I want to thank you for listening in tonight. Whether listening live, downloaded, or streaming after the fact, make sure you click the like, share, and follow button on whatever platform you're listening to us from iTunes to iHeartRadio, Spotify, Deezer, Spreaker, CastBox, Amazon, Google Play, you name it, we are on it. So feel free to listen where you feel most comfortable, but please make sure you click those buttons. The more that you do that, the more that it moves us up the podcast community rankings, more people that discover the show, and ultimately the more things that we can do with the show. Not only that, but it does keep you in the loop on new episodes as they air, and allows you to jump back through our past archives to listen to all of our past episodes, because there's something for absolutely everyone out there. We do bring you shows 3 times a month on Thursday nights, 8 to 9:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Always bringing on someone great in the occult field, from authors to practitioners to ritual tool makers to artists. You name it, we bring them on, we interview them, we hang out with them and pick their brains, and tonight is no different. We always have great guests, so make sure you jump through and find someone you might resonate with. Tonight's episode I am very excited for, but before we jump into that, I do want to thank my sponsors, Goetic Impressions and Limitless Liberation. Both companies are ritual tool makers that make absolutely phenomenal works for your altar and workspace that will amplify your ritual workings. I have workings from both and tools from both of them. I stand behind the people that I promote on the show and who promote me. And I'll tell you what, guys, if you are a ritual practitioner, you need to look into both of these companies. Once again, Goetic Impressions and Limitless Liberation. We will be talking about both individually throughout the show tonight on a small segue where we stop, talk about that company specifically, and give you where you can check them out as far as their links. So make sure you look into them. Other than that, we want to thank you for listening in. And like I said, make sure you share this around, tell your friends and family about it. If you have any questions, want to see us do anything differently, bring someone on the show that we haven't yet, you can email me at celestialoddities@gmail.com. Again, that is celestialoddities@gmail.com. That is our parent company. My company, Celestial Oddities, brings several radio shows and entertainment out to you, including our other radio shows, Celestial Oddities, Pair of Normal Guys podcast, Odd World podcast, and also this, Knights of the Nephilim. So without further ado, I would like to jump into our guest tonight and pick his brain, tell you a little bit about who he is and what he does. We have Wilmar Taal on the line, and he is a author of, a couple very, very good books, not only well written, but the artwork and everything packaged together in these books is gorgeous. I suggest as we talk about it tonight, you look them up on Amazon, you look them up through his press company, and you buy them. It's something everyone should have and own in their library. And I know certainly something you can learn a lot from, and I'm excited to learn tonight because, as you know, folks, most of the authors and most of the practitioners that I bring onto the line here, I am involved in a lot of what they do, whether it be Goetic magic, whether it be, working through other old grimoires or different style of high ceremonial magic. A lot of these things I'm involved with. Now, this topic tonight, we are going to be talking about gnomes and gnome magic and a lot of different sides that I personally don't know a whole lot about, and I'm excited to get to learn more. I'm always craving more knowledge. So we're going to hear it from the man himself. Wilmar, welcome to the show, brother. How you doing?
Thank you. I'm doing fine. And, it's great to be here.
Absolutely. No, we appreciate you taking time to jump on with us because obviously there's a heck of a time difference between you and myself. You are coming to us from Amsterdam. Is that correct?
Near Amsterdam, from the Netherlands. That's why I have a funny accent. I work in Amsterdam. It's about 14 kilometers, say 10 miles away.
Okay, so not too bad.
No, it isn't.
No, it's about a 6-hour time difference, I think we talked about.
Yeah. It's about 3:15 in the afternoon here.
Okay, and it's 9:20 in the morning here, so that's great. No, I appreciate you, certainly coming on with us, despite the time difference, to be able to talk to us. Most of our episodes are live, but if you're listening out there, folks, this will be a pre-recorded due to the difference in time. I certainly don't expect Wilmar to be talking to us at 3 o'clock in the morning on our normal airing time, so we are going to record this episode and air it, but if you have any questions or concerns, you can leave them on this episode, and either he or I will get back to you and answer your questions, whether it's regarding, his books, his workings. We will make sure it gets to the right hand so that those questions can be answered. If you are listening out there, Spreaker.com or the Spreaker app, Spreaker, is the way that you can message us during the show and leave comments, or you can obviously message either of us on our Facebook pages. So, why don't you I like to start out traditional in all my interviews, and just really get a grip and grasp who it is that you are and how you came to be with your research. So why don't you give us kind of a back view of your fascination with research in the ritual side of things and with magic, how you came to be as far as getting into these subjects, building up, and becoming an author?
Well, my general interest in the occult started way back when I was a teenager, mostly because I was rebelling against my parents, who were devout Christians. And from there, I started reading a lot of books about the subject. When around 1995, I started to go back to college. Cultural studies, where I kind of try to go into the more secret history of Europe instead of the more general history of Europe. So that resulted in my thesis on the Necronomicon, for once, because for the Netherlands it was quite an original subject. For Americans it apparently isn't that original, but it made a lasting impression on the professor, and my thesis, I don't know how you say it in English.
No, you got it. No, thesis is correct.
Now, my thesis, supervisor, that's the one. And after that, I was planning to go into a book that I wanted to write, and for some reason, I graduated in 2004, and for some reason I just started publishing in 2014, and that was because I couldn't find a subject that was interesting enough to keep me going with all the research and the writing. And in 2011 or 2012, I stumbled upon a story in the eastern part of the Netherlands about an occult group that was performing rituals in a pan-Germanic magical way, and it was a strange story. So I tried to discover what was what caused the story to get told over there, and before I knew it, I was writing a book, and I published it in 2014. After that, I was invited by the granddaughter of Mr. Eldermans to write a book about him. That became The Silent Listener, and from The Silent Listener, I jumped into his gnome research, and that's about 400 pages that he left behind, with his notes on gnomes, on gnome magic, on people who saw gnomes, the discussions he had with certain people about gnomes, and that resulted in a trilogy, of which part 1 has been published last year, and part 2 is about to be published somewhere in the very near future, and part 3 will be, I think, next year. I don't know.
No, that's great, though. I mean, it's fun to see how it kind of, waterfalled down from the start. You started the book. It got you enough popularity and recognition from that to be reached out from Eldermans, you said granddaughter who reached out to you, and then that got you in the doorway there, which then, created your first book on the market, your second book total, because I think the original book's no longer in print. Is that correct?
The first one?
Your very
Dutch?
First book.
My very first book was in Dutch, and it's going to come back in print in January, February next year.
Oh, awesome. Okay, because I was going to say, I was looking into that, and I seen it said it was no longer in print, so that's great to hear it's coming back.
It's coming back, but totally revised. Looking back on that first book, I wasn't really pleased with how it turned out, and I was wondering what would it look like if I wrote it today. So I kept a lot of the parts that were okay in my opinion, and I added about 60% new to the book as it is now. So, and as it is now, it's much more to my liking than it was.
Well, I think sometimes you have to revisit those works, look at it from a clean eye years later, that you got it out, it served its purpose, but you look at it and say, I could have done better. And then you go back and revisit it, bring it back at a much grander scale. So I'm sure when it comes out this time, it's certainly going to resonate with people even harder than it did before, which is a great thing. What is that first book about?
It's about what we call the Roundhouse Mystery. If you go looking on the internet, you can find 3 splendid articles by Theo Paimons on Mysterious Universe website. And he was very spot on with his criticism about the Pan-Germanic cult that was supposed to have worked in that region. We call that region the North Veluwe. It is a very green area of the Netherlands, very much forests and moors and a lot of nature. And also, and that's the thing that fascinated me, a lot of legends and myths surrounding supernatural happenings over there. You can also find it in the names of the area. We have near a small town called Putten, we have the Toverberg, which you call the Magic Mountain. It's a hill where people think witches met during certain times of the month. We have the Duivelsbos, the Devil's Forest, which also resonates with certain tales that are told about that specific forest over there. There are all kinds of supernatural creatures like werewolves, giants, gnomes, for instance. There are all kinds of stories about these creatures told, and so I started to discover that a lot of the tales people tell each other are because people tell each other tales for centuries. So that a story about a Pan-Germanic cult performing occult rituals in an area near a house, a roundhouse, would start over there isn't surprising. There are a lot of tales told over there about. We also have these creatures we call firemen, which are people who denied to have committed a crime during their life and are sentenced to burn forever. So if you walk through the forest at night and you see suddenly a person on fire, you have met the fireman.
Okay. Wow, that's interesting. No, I think everything about that's pretty interesting. The forest, the mountain. I'm someone who heavily believes in the paranormal and supernatural, not only from a magic and ritual standpoint, but I do run a paranormal investigation team, and we do go to a lot of very hot spots and famous locations. And I got to be honest with you, I've seen certainly things many, many times that cannot be explained by most human beings, but they're out there, folks. So that's interesting. I have not heard about the firemen. That's a very cool tale. I like that.
Yeah, it's literally translated. We call it a vuurman, which is a vuur is fire, man. But it is, it's a burning person, a burning man, a burning soul, for that matter. And if you go look for stories about those creatures. You can find them practically everywhere in that area. We have near a town called Apeldoorn, where we have the Woeste Hoeve, or the Fierce Farm. No, not fierce. The Woest, they call it Woest because it's a rugged territory. But over there we have a story about such a creature. Near Speult, a small town, we have a story about Burning Berend, which is a person who also denied having murdered someone and now has to burn for all eternity. And what we also have are very interesting creatures, white women. Ever heard of them?
I've seen, I know about, like, over here we have the woman in a white dress, where it's constantly seen this lady in a white dress, but I don't know if that's the same.
No, our white women are a lot more like banshees.
Okay.
If you see one, it's bad news.
Absolutely, yeah. Banshees are nothing to mess with. Any stories I've ever heard, pertaining to them has never been good.
No, it's not. But with white women, it's like they try to trick you. They're somewhere between a gnome and a banshee in their behavior. What they try to do is, there's one story we know about the white woman in the tree, who is sitting there, and there are two men approaching her, and she says, if you go dig there, over there, you find a treasure. But during the dig, you are not allowed to talk or to make a sound. And the treasure is dug very deep, so the men have to dig their way through a lot of soil, and then they start to manage to get the heavy chest to get it up on the ground. But because it's hidden so deep, it slips, and then they utter one sound, and the treasure is gone. And that's the kind of tricks they try to pull on you. It's the same with gnomes. Please don't piss off a gnome, because they're really a nuisance. They try to. They start to wake you up with knocking sounds. They throw things at your windows. And that's also something that a white woman can do. The poltergeist-like phenomena, like knocking or moving things around, or just making things disappear. And yeah, you can find them practically everywhere, in old mounds, or in old buildings, or even in hollow trees.
No, that's very interesting. I haven't heard that specifically. It seems that there's a lot of trickster spirits out there, or cryptids, or whatever you want to put the title to them. I know even, many times it has been talked about from sailors and things as mermen and mermaids, that they often trick people as well, as they will pretend that they're drowning and you jump in to help them, and then they pull you under the water and actually drown you. So people want to think of mermaids as being these beautiful women that are, looking for a sailor for like a romantic thing, and what they've kind of popularized it as over the years in movies and things. And, if you go back into the lore, that's not the case. They're actually very vicious.
Well, there are as well as here. We have a few of those tales concerning what we once called the South Sea. Now we call it the IJssel Lake, because they built a dam, and the water turned from salt to sweet. So it's not a sea anymore, but now a lake. But in the time when it still was a sea, there were stories about sailors who indeed encountered mermaids and didn't live to tell.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, everyone, like I said, wants to think that they're kind, but I mean, from what I've read of them and researched over the years, is they like to trick people. It was easy to trick men. And a lot of times these stories pertain to men. I think we're easily trickable. When we see a woman and they want us to dig the hole for the treasure chest, they want us to jump in and save them in the water, we're dumb. We're like, all right, let's do it. I think women have a little bit more common sense in a lot of those cases. That's why they're not in the stories.
Well, yeah, that might be one explanation. But also, the woman is a lot of times the trickster. So there's also something very non-feministic
Absolutely.
stories made up by men, I think.
I think that might be it as well, as it's heavily told by men, so that they give it the female antagonist side.
If you go look into the Bible, women are almost always evil. Eve was the one who picked the apple in the Garden of Eden. Women are always on the bad side in the Bible. So I think there's still a lot of work to do for a lot of people to make the gender equality work in this world.
I believe so, because I mean, as you said, that Eve obviously was the one that took the bite of the apple first and condemned us to sin. But then before that, and a lot of people don't dig too deep into the theology of the matter, but when you start to really dig into it, the very first female was Lilith, and she left the Garden of Eden because she did not want to be subordinate to Adam, and he said that he wanted her to lay under him. While they were, exchanging passion or making love, having sex, whatever you want to call it, that she did not want to always be on the bottom and did not want to be subservient to him and wanted to be equal, and he would not have that. So she left the Garden of Eden, and God sent his angels after her because no one was to leave the garden. Well, and some workings out there that they believe Satan, or the adversary, actually was not an entity in itself. It's just a title for the being. Satan was just the adversary of God, and it ended up being Lilith coming back in serpent form because she is the mother of snakes. And she came back as the snake to trick, who was her new girlfriend, and tricked her and tricked Adam and kind of condemned them all because of the anger she felt for, how she was treated and condemned. So very interesting that the very, original start of it all was, in this case, two things that were done that's kind of wild, and both of them were the fault of women.
Yeah, and it still works in our current society 2,000 years later or more. We don't know actually when the first part of the Bible, the Old Testament, was actually written. But yeah, old ideas, we need to move on to something new.
We do. I think it's time. Let go of the past, begin to look towards the future. So no, that's great. I definitely like what you had to say about the original book, and I look forward to it coming out. You said did you say early next year? You said
early next year, but it's in Dutch. I'm looking into a possible English translation, but I don't think it is very interesting for English people.
Well, it'd be hard too with a lot of the names. I think taking it from Dutch to English might take a lot of the flavor of the book out of it. So it's one of those things that obviously personally I would love to read it, but at the same time, for integrity of the book, it might be best not to translate it into English and leave it in Dutch.
Yeah, well, we're looking into it, but I don't think it's going to be... My newest book on Bob Richel is going to everyone in English and in Dutch. So,
awesome. Well, keep me posted. Like I said, I have a never-ending thirst for knowledge and reading. So my problem is I stack up too many books and just don't have the time to read them. I'll buy 10 books, and by the time I read 2 of them, I bought 10 more, and I'm like, I'll never get through this pile. But it's a challenge I like to have.
Well, you have to go look into my living room. There's more books than I can read in my lifetime.
Exactly. That's where I'm at. I'm like, I could never read all the books I have now the rest of my life, but I still keep buying more.
Yeah. It's an addiction, I know.
It certainly is. So why don't you tell us, so obviously after releasing your first book, you were contacted by J.H.W. Elderman's granddaughter to look into her grandfather's work and to start writing about him. How did that all come about, and how did you feel taking on that task?
Actually, I contacted her during the research of my first book because Eldermans also had something to do with that roundhouse tale.
Oh, okay.
He was getting involved in 1978. He contacted the original researchers of the occult group, and he told that he had contact with the owner of the roundhouse during the 1920s when his parents had a family home in Nunspeet itself. So they had a vacation home. They lived in Rotterdam, and every time they had time off, they traveled to Nunspeet and were spending time over there. And Eldermans told them that he had contacted the owner of the house and that he knew more about it. So they were very interested in knowing what he knew. And actually, the Pan-Germanic part of the tale is told to them by Eldermans.
Oh, okay. Interesting.
If this is very interesting because the persons in that group that was researching the occult group that was active in between 1907 and 1918 told that they had also spoke to people who all told them about the Pan-Germanic cult. And recently I came across a few of their research reports, and the interesting thing was they had spoken to about 20 to 25 people, but none of these people had uttered the word Pan-Germanic or cult. To make matters more interesting, they didn't even speak about the occult in general. So that was quite strange. Where did the occult component in the story come from? And that's where Eldermans came in, because Eldermans was really a walking encyclopedia of the occult. He had, in the time that he was alive, you had to be invited to become a member of the Royal Library. Nowadays you can walk in and you can just consult any book you like, but in that time you had to be invited to be a member of the Royal Library, and he was a member. I actually found evidence that he was a member of the Royal Library, and that he consulted books on folklore, on magic, on the paranormal. You name it, he consulted it. I also discovered that he was very interested in fertility magic and fertility rituals, and that he consulted a yearbook that was forbidden all around the world except in the Netherlands. In the Netherlands, nothing was forbidden. You could consult practically everything that you wanted. And it was called Anthropophyteia, which is a Greek word for anthropo, human. I lost it, but it was about the sexual behavior of man, and it was a yearbook that was published between 1908 and 1912. So also another time where people were very keen on very graphic descriptions of sexual magical rituals or fertility rituals. There's a very detailed description of how people in Indonesia managed to pierce their genitals with pieces of bamboo, which they called an ampalang.
Wow.
What we nowadays know as a Prince Albert, they already knew back then, but they pierced their genitals with this small pieces of bamboo. It is written very graphically, and it caused that the yearbooks of Anthropophyteia were forbidden in England, in Germany, France, and here in the Netherlands it was just free to consult. So Eldermans was really digging into that matter, and he kept full notebooks with all kinds of notes from these yearbooks. And nowadays it is quite easy to get a copy of one of those yearbooks. If you go to archives.org, you can consult them practically all of them.
That's interesting, though, because you said it. You can easily get into your hands nowadays most things that you want to read or research. Back then, you had to work. You had to travel. You had to get clearances to even be allowed in certain libraries to be able to read those books. Then you had to find the books. You weren't able to take them with you, so you had to jot down your notes and then read through your notes and figure out what you wanted to present or use it for. I feel that is one thing lacking nowadays, is that anyone can throw together a book and put it out. Anybody can put together, posts or things of that nature, but back then you had to really, really dig for it. And, that weeded out the weak. That weeded out people who truly had a passion for this compared to someone who was trying to get a name out there. And obviously Elderman put, a lot of work into that. From what I've researched through your work and seeing his manuscripts of, 400, 500, 600 pages of documents of all sorts of supernatural and strange rituals and different types of backgrounds, from Germanic to Solomonic to everything in between. It's very, very interesting that obviously he had a massive passion for this.
Oh, yeah, he did. I found evidence that he went to Paris, to the Bibliothèque d'Arsenal, to consult the original pages by Monsieur Barrault was the one who translated the Keys of Solomon from the Latin version by Rabbi Abognazar, who translated it from Hebrew from Rabbi Solomon.
Oh, that's awesome. Now, question I want to ask real quick. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah. So you said you were going to ask a question.
So with him translating, obviously the Greater and Lesser Keys of Solomon and doing that work, we know that for yourself, you are a researcher and author, but as we talked about prior to the show, you are not yourself a practitioner. Was Elderman, he obviously did a lot of research, but do you have evidence in there that he himself stepped into the ritual chamber and did a lot of these things, such as the Solomonic work?
No.
Okay.
No, there's no evidence whatsoever that he. If you go to the website of the Museum of Witchcraft and Magic, you can obviously find some. That he was a member of a certain sexual magical society, but the strange fact is that we cannot find any evidence of that society whatsoever. Magia Amatoria, Ars Amatoria. He mentioned about a dozen of these magical sexual societies in the region where he lived. But you also have to know that these societies try to make contact with people through various channels. And one of the most popular channels is personals in newspapers. It's small enough not to catch the eye of the general people, but those who know where to look. And I have gone through hundreds of newspapers looking for those personals, and they weren't there. When you go look for the magical societies Bob Richel has mentioned in his works, it just took 2 newspapers, and I already found the personal from, there they are.
Wow.
You cannot find anything about the society itself because they didn't leave behind any archives, but you can find their traces, where they have been, where they met, and where they did their magic, or did their rituals, or just convene with each other to speak about certain topics. They leave traces, and that's the thing that made me suspicious of Elderman's sexual magical societies. They don't leave a trace nowhere, and it's suspicious.
Yeah, it's strange that he talks about it, that you have obviously background information of these names and that they were there, but no manuscripts, no dialogue left behind, no traces of anything. It's just almost vanished off the face of the earth. So either they were very good at covering their tracks, or there's something deeper at work there.
Yeah, but why do they want to cover the tracks?
Yeah, it's strange, because you even said in your culture that not a lot of things have to be covered up. Like, whereas there's books around the world that were shunned and not allowed to even be here, over there was not a big thing to be able to obtain and read and research. And that was actually one of the questions I was going to ask, is throughout history, certain cultures, certain countries are very against magic of all forms, including even right now in the Middle East. If you are still found to be a left-hand path practitioner, you will be stoned or hung to this day. Now, in Germanic culture, is that not the case? It's always been more open to be able to practice as you will?
No. If you go look in Germany throughout the 16th and 17th century, you will find that a lot of women have been accused of witchcraft and have been burned. The only country throughout history that was very mild in their approach of magic and alchemy and astrology was the Netherlands. From all the witch trials held in Europe, only 250 convictions have been spoken out here in the Netherlands. While if you go look in England, for instance, or Germany or France, they go into the thousands.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a very small number compared to a lot of other places, as you mentioned.
And a lot of the books on the occult that were published in those days were actually printed in the Netherlands, because we were a Protestant country, but also a merchant's country. So if there was money to be made, we did it, and there were no principles. So there were some books or pamphlets and such that were considered heretical in the rest of Europe. Well, they printed it in the Netherlands. John Locke even escaped to the Netherlands during the Glorious Revolution because he wasn't very interesting to the Dutch. So René Descartes, the philosopher, in France he was wanted. In the Netherlands they didn't care. So he published all his works in the Netherlands.
No, it's smart. If you're going to get it out there, find a place that's not going to, chase you out pretty much. And that's great that there are those pockets of time and those places in time that people were able to still get the occult work out there, because it was so incredibly of a hidden subject. And you had to be very careful that if the wrong hands got a hold of your work, that was it for you.
Well, we gained a reputation as well.
True, yeah, it kind of has both sides of the coin there. You do get the reputation then if you're allowing that to happen.
Well, if you go look in, for instance, in American culture, a lot of things that are supernatural are, for some reason, Dutch. The movie by Tim Burton, which one? About the headless rider, Sleepy Hollow.
Yes.
It's a Dutch town. All the people have Dutch names because they are also associated with the supernatural in some way. In England, you also see it that a lot of people, when they are talking about the Netherlands, there's always this supernatural aura surrounding it. Because if you wanted to have books concerning magic or other subjects that were forbidden in those days, you went in the Netherlands.
It's interesting. I think, do you feel that it's just because for some reason the Netherlands is just a massive hotspot, a giant ley line of energy, and that's why things happen there? Because in the paranormal, there's a lot of ley line areas that if you go to those areas, they're just hotbeds for activity to happen, rather than an area that doesn't have a ley line underneath it. Now, the Netherlands does certainly have a lot of lore and history to it. I've read, and I don't remember the name of the forest, but I read I don't know if I'd call it a report, or it wasn't a book. It was just maybe 20, 30 pages long of someone talking about one of the forests in the Netherlands and the crazy activity that happens in that forest at nighttime. And I found it fascinating. You're right. A lot of it does stem back to there.
No. It's mostly money. The Dutch knew that if there was a demand for it, they could make money of it. Not because there was a really rich magical culture over here, not at all. Also, the first skeptic books were made in the Netherlands by Balthasar Bekker. The book called it's like, something like Reginald Scott's The Discovery of Witchcraft. It was such a kind of book.
Okay, so they kind of did both sides of the coins, the paranormal side and the magic side, and then also wrote the skeptical side.
They did. Also because a lot of the scientists that were working in those days were also wanted by the Catholic Church. And yeah, in the Netherlands, they were free from that influence of the Roman Catholics and the Inquisition. And because the Netherlands were at that point in time heavily at war with the Habsburg, as we call it, the dynasty that was ruled from Spain in those days. We have been at war with Spain for about 80 years, and one of the reasons was that the Dutch didn't want to pay taxes anymore to the Roman Catholics, because around that time, 1517, the Protestants started coming up, and yeah, the Netherlands were very much attracted to that Calvinistic way of life, because yeah, it made it more easy to become an economic force to be reckoned with. The Netherlands became very rich during those days, 16th, 17th century. So yeah, if you want to go look for a more culture of magic, you have to go to Germany or to England, for that matter, where there was a lot of more folklore concerning magic, alchemy. It was a better environment for it for some reason. In the Netherlands, we did have these kind of cunning men, cunning women, wise women, kind of type of people, but they were more like herbalists and not as much witches or the Netherlands is a kind of a strange place concerning magic. Nowadays, there is more magic going on than that was 500 years ago, for instance.
And that's interesting because, yeah, it kind of flip-flopped, as you said. There's more now than there was back then, and back then it wasn't so much your spiritual alchemy or your ceremonial magic. It was, like you said, herbalism and other things like that, but they also created a lot of lore and mysticism behind that area, which was a big seller, obviously, because anything hidden, anything that you weren't allowed to get your hands on around the world is exactly what people that were interested in these subjects wanted to get their hands on. That taboo of having it is what made you resonate with it, that, hey, I have this hidden book or this hidden subject that I'm not supposed to know about. So them putting it out would have been big money, like you said. But that's interesting to hear that there really wasn't a lot of just straight up ceremonial magic going on there back then, that was more towards Europe and more towards Germany.
More towards Germany, Switzerland, Austria, that part of Europe that was very into. Look at the Rosicrucians; they originated in Germany.
Yes, and they've established a hell of a lineage from there. I mean, the Golden Dawn and everything stemming from that, and all very prevalent still today.
Well, for instance, you see in the 19th century that a lot of these pan-Germanic occult societies are coming up, like the Thule Society, the Germanenorden, the Germanic orders, the Armanenschaft, the Germanic priests. And for some reason, the Netherlands didn't want to follow into that kind of occult flow. The first pan-Germanic group that we can find is in 1934. For instance, the first pan-Germanic group in Austria was somewhere around 1850. So the Netherlands were always a little bit behind in those kind of trends. But also with, for instance, getting industrialized. The whole of Europe was having steam engines, and the Netherlands were still plowing with a horse. We didn't get trains before the end of the 19th century, while other countries already had trains in the end of the 18th century. For some reason, the Netherlands it has been a country where they say act normal, then you act crazy enough.
Well, I think maybe sometimes it's nice to be simple, though. Sometimes you don't need to follow the trends that others are doing in advance. I mean, yes, advancements, technology, and things like that are great, but sometimes I think that can water down a culture and start to pull it from its original roots. So, I mean, it sounds like the Netherlands really just wanted to keep things how they did it. They didn't want to, change to social norms. They wanted to do their own thing, and that's very respectable, actually.
Oh, it is. But yeah, once you have that power, the only thing that you can do is lose it.
Exactly. No, that is true.
That's what happened at the end of the 17th century. Then England came up as a more potent force in economy and warfare, and the whole English empire started to form around the world. And yeah, that's when the Netherlands lost their edge.
Okay.
But yeah, well, we're still doing very good nowadays, and it's mostly based on that small, what we call the long 17th century, because it started already in the 16th and it ended at the beginning of the 18th century. But we still benefit from those days, and not always something very to be proud of, because there was also a lot of slavery and a lot of exploiting other cultures. But yeah, I think every European civilization has been guilty of that in some way. But if you go look to the magical lore, the Netherlands isn't that very interesting. It's much more interesting to go look to England, because yeah, there is much more going on over there than is here.
No, it's very interesting. I mean, but it all plays its part, like I said. So even though it wasn't doing the same things as others were doing, it's still very vital to the overall storyline of everything that was going on and in the workings that were happening there. So that is very interesting. Now, I want to...
Well, catching up.
What's that?
I said we are catching up.
You know what? That's okay, though. Like I said, sometimes that's the case. Sometimes you got to figure out, do you want to go with what everybody else is doing? So, no, I completely understand that. Now, we're going to jump into one of your books here in just a moment. But before I do, I want to take my first break here. I want to go over one of my sponsors and talk a little bit in depth about them. First sponsor of the evening tonight is Limitless Liberation, which was inspired by both Lucifer and Belial. Lucifer has been with, I'm reading it from the standpoint of the owner, Elena, and this says, Lucifer has been with me most of my life, as far back as I can remember. Belial and I started to work when I was just going through a very difficult part of my life. He completely turned mine and my family's life around for the better in a very short period of time. In return, he asked me to create what's called Charger for him. He showed me the design, so I created the first Charger for Belial, and Lucifer wanted one next. From there, I had spirits lining up requesting for magical items. Some are control freaks, others just inspire. They all are so individually different, but every single item created has power within it. Each item operates on many levels. They operate as an anchor for the spirit you are working with, thus aiding easier connection between the two of you. They also operate like a power cell or battery, where they already come with an inherent energy to them, but they become stronger as you feed them and pull from them during ritual as you strengthen your workings. Limitless Liberation continues to grow to honor the spirits that we love to work and build relationships with. And you can check out her work on www.etsy.com/shop etsy.com/limitless liberation. And one more time, that is etsy.com/shop/limitless liberation. Or if you go to Etsy and just type in Limitless Liberation, you'll find her page as well. Beautiful, custom-made, tailor-made items. Her work is gorgeous. She puts her passion and heart into her implements that she makes, and they speak volumes. Even looking at them through picture, you will see the emanating force that comes from these items, let alone getting them in person. I suggest anyone out there serious into ritual magic to pick up one of her items, especially a charger, and put that on your altar. It will amplify, and I stand behind this, it'll amplify your workings. You'll start to notice higher forms of energy coming into your temple space and your ritual chamber that weren't there before. So whether you are new and you need that extra boost to get where you're looking towards, or you are an experienced adept and you just want that extra boost for your workings, that extra oomph, I suggest checking her out, and that is Limitless Liberation. All right, guys, we're back on Nights of the Nephilim. We've been hanging out with Wilmar for the last roughly about an hour now. We've been talking about the history of the Netherlands. We've been talking about his upbringing into becoming an author. We've been talking about the occult and different items pertaining to such. So we've had a great conversation so far, and if you're tuning in right now and miss some of it, don't fret, don't worry. You can always jump back and listen from the beginning. As I mentioned at the beginning of the episode, we are on all online platforms, so you can listen to us wherever you feel most comfortable, and we ask that you do so. So make sure you check out the entire episode, and make sure you jump through our past episodes as well. There's something for absolutely everybody. So let's go ahead and jump in, Wilmar, to your second book. When you were working with Elderman's notes and his workings, how did you feel originally taking that task on? I mean, I'm sure it was overwhelming because, as we already mentioned, this wasn't he had a couple pages here and there. He had just page after page after page of not even just one subject, but a various amount of subjects of magic. How was it tackling a book about him and his workings?
Exhausting.
I would imagine, certainly.
Well, you have to realize that there are about 2,100 pages in England, in the Museum of Witchcraft and Magic. There are about 3,100 pages in Switzerland, in Zurich. Wow. In the Centraal Bibliotheek. We went there in 2015 for a couple of days, and it was really a hectic expedition. There were about 1,000 pages in a private collection from an Austrian scientist, and then there were those small collections all around the Netherlands of certain people who had 12 pages here, a couple of pages there. There was a museum in Den Helder in the Netherlands who had about 7 framed pictures from the Eldermans collection. So I went there as well. The Venus Temple in Amsterdam, the Sex Museum, also had a couple of pages from Eldermans sadomasochistic magic stored. So it was quite hard to get in touch with those people because they don't respond to email, they don't respond to their website. I actually in the end I called them, and they were like, we might have such a thing, but we cannot give you access to it. So in the end, I found a photograph of the one page they had on exhibit in the archives of the Museum of Magic, Witchcraft and Magic in Boscastle. And then there were the private archives, and Elderman's granddaughter lived in France, so we had to go to France as well.
That's amazing, though. You put in work.
Yeah, we did. You had to see us go to Switzerland. It was madness. We drove out on a Sunday, And when we arrived in Zurich, it was around 7 in the evening, and the freaky part was that there was a concert by AC/DC. So there was a bit of a traffic jam around the city. And if there is one thing I cannot handle, it's traffic jams, and especially traffic jams in strange countries. So it was quite the expedition. Eventually, we arrived at our apartment, and the next morning, when we were going to the library, we discovered what a strange city Zurich actually is, because the library was in between a pharmacy and a supermarket, a small road going up a mountain. And we drove past it 3-4 times, I think. And once we found it, yeah, it was quite easy, and it was actually quite beautiful library. It's called the Oskar Schlag collection, and people who are first into the occult will know who Oskar Schlag was. He was a psychiatrist from Switzerland who was very much an expert on the occult, and he has left his library to the Zentralbibliothek, the Central Library of Zurich, Zurich and University, with the one demand that it would stay in the house where he lived, and that's the reason why it was so hard to find that library, because it was in his own house.
Okay.
That he
Yeah, it would be easy to pass it.
Yeah. Like I said, we passed it 3 or 4 times. But once inside, it was heaven. There was so much. I had these, I had the original print, the first edition of Ola by Aleister Crowley, signed by Crowley himself, in my hand, and it was like, wow.
That's awesome.
That's one of the moments one won't easily forget. But also the original pages of Eldermans' work. And the one thing that really struck me was that he was working on blotting paper. 1,500 pages on blotting paper. Only it was hell to photograph it all, because blotting paper, as you know, it's transparent, and you had to lay it on a piece of white paper to get a good picture of it.
Yeah, because you wouldn't be able to get a clear picture without it. So, I mean, not only are you putting in the work to get there and to get access to it and to have it in your hands, but then you're putting in work to even get a clear picture of it.
The tables were brown, so if you lay it on the table, you don't see the picture very...
it blends into the table.
It blends in with the color of the table. So, yeah, we were in for a challenge, but we managed.
Well, see, now right there, Wilmar, is why I respect you, because, like I said, it's easy for someone to come up with a couple concepts, slap together a book, put it out there, and praise themselves as an occult writer. It's a different breed for someone to travel country to country, getting access to private, libraries, into museums, or trying to at least, and making the phone calls and getting stuck in the traffic and getting lost in the town. Those moments are stressful, but those make up the journey of what made this book happen. And I love that. And I love the fact that you didn't get discouraged, that you kept pushing until you got there.
Well, that's just one part. Then you get home and you have to read it all.
Yes. Yeah, that's the journey, and then the research.
Pages. Yeah, and sometimes these are pages with a lot of illustrations, so you don't have to read a lot. But there are also pages which is actually from the top to the bottom only his handwriting. And fortunately for me, Eldermans had a very legible handwriting, so it was quite easy to read. But there are also people who have these handwritings which take you hours to decipher. But yeah, I think I have read approximately 10,000 pages he has written.
Wow, that's incredible. You gotta wonder where he found the time to write that much. I mean, because that's no easy task, because not only was he writing it? He was researching it himself to figure out to write his manuscript. So, I mean, that 10,000 pages is a lifetime, obviously, and it was a lifetime of work to be able to put that out there. And the fact that you were able to see it, research it, and condense it down into a book about his workings in life is amazing. I'm glad that you were able to carry on his work so that a new generation can discover him, discover you, and discover the work that he presented.
Well, he wanted to destroy it.
Oh, wow.
He has destroyed a significant number of pages and drawings. I learned from his granddaughter that a few months before his passing, he hired a shredder and destroyed a lot of his own work. The part that we know of now is what he gave as a heritage to his son-in-law, Bob Duchel. And Bob started, when he got the heritage, he started to sell some of the lots of his father-in-law because he wanted to get his name out there. He wanted him to be known to the people. We know that Bob had tried in 1987 to get a publisher to publish a book about Eldermans. And he almost got there, that the book was published nationally. And then the publisher pulled back and said, no, we're not going to do it because the author we wanted to hire doesn't have the time. So Bob found another interested person, and that was Henriette Gorter, who wrote about people who see gnomes in the Netherlands. And she was one of the first persons to work with the Gnome Manuscript of Eldermans. And she published a book in 1989 in an edition of 500 copies. And that was a book about gnomes and magic. And what was the next one? The next one was The Occult Reliquary by Daniel Schulke, about the Eldermans collection. And then my book came.
No, that's awesome, though, that obviously his work resonated that much, even with him trying to destroy it. Do we know why he decided to want to destroy it? Because obviously, if you were able to get your hand on 10,000 pages and that's what it was left, think of how much, obviously, that was destroyed, in fact. So, I mean, that's incredible to know how much work, and also saddening to know how much work has just gone from the face of the earth now.
Yeah, we have estimated that it was originally about 20,000 pages.
So about half his work remains, half his work's gone.
Half his work is gone. And there are a couple of hypotheses about why he destroyed it. A lot of people thought that he had collected very dangerous occult rituals which should not fall into the hands of inexperienced people. I doubt if that's the case. I spoke to his former neighbor's son. He's an old man now, but around that time he was about 15, 16 years old. And he told me about him, watching him sitting at his dinner table drawing. And he was drawing a very specific subject of two German SS officers who were abusing a woman. And he also had a box with drawings called Psychopathia Sexualis, or the psychopathic sexual nature of humans. And that book was by von Kraft-Ebing. And it dealt with all kinds of what was considered back then aberrant sexual behavior. So homosexuality was considered an aberration. The book is from 1898. Lesbians were considered an aberration, but also very unusual for the time. The book dealt with necrophilia, it dealt with pederasty, it dealt with incest, it dealt with all kinds of those kind of subjects. And if you think that Eldermans, he died in 1985, that his family would discover drawings of that nature, they might have a few questions to ask. So I think those kind of drawings and notes are the things that were destroyed, and not as much his occult notes, because most of the notes that he made, we can find it still in publications right now. I have the Keys of Solomon downstairs in my bookcase. The Rites of Abramelin, I have it. So if that's what he was destroying, I don't think so.
Yeah, it's amazing, though. I mean,
there's stores that we can find them.
It's just, I agree with you. I think that probably would be the reason why he did that, is because his passion was to research and write about these subjects. And when you're in the vitality of life, you don't think about, like, if someone gets your hands on them, you're doing your work, you're doing your passion. But as you become older and you know that book's about to close and your life is about to end, you start to look back on it and say, what if my family, what if my friends, what if the general public gets a hold of these things, talking about things like necrophilia and incest and all these other magic rituals and things that maybe you're like, you know what, if they get a hold of them, it's going to crush a lot of people I'm close to. Plus, the media could have a frenzy with this and really slander my name. Let's destroy it, which is sad. I mean, it would have been better to have locked into a vault somewhere that maybe 100 years after his death, someone could discover and then put it out. But at least half of his work, did remain, and it was still to be published, because it's fascinating. I mean, from gnomes to Abramelin rituals. I mean, like you said, I myself work Solomonic rituals, and I've worked out of the Abramelin manuscripts and everything, and it's fascinating that he just dove on a very, very wide array of subjects.
Oh, he did. But now you mentioned that he should have put it on an embargo of about 100 years. There was this person in Joppe, in the eastern part of the Netherlands, who got a couple of pages from Eldermans in 1989. And he wasn't comfortable with these pages because he was thinking that Eldermans was some kind of high civil servant in the Dutch Department of Justice. He wasn't. He was just a probation officer, but no matter. He was so anxious with these pages in his house that he at one point said, I need to get it out. So he took it to the regional archives and he placed it under an embargo of 25 years. So from 1990, it would be free to consult in 2015. 2015, I went to that archive and I asked for those Eldermans pages, and then I discovered that it were pages from his Gnome Manuscript.
Oh, wow. So that is amazing.
These are already free to consult around the world. And they were still lying under an embargo of 25 years because he was scared that the Secret Service would come visit him to impound those pages from him because they were from Eldermans. And what I also discovered is that Eldermans sometimes could make people believe things about him that were actually not true.
Okay, so he had a way of kind of steering the crowd in certain ways that might be beneficial to him or might cast a certain light on him that he wanted to portray that might not necessarily have been the case.
That's right.
You know what, though? That's a part of magic right there. So even though he might not have been a practitioner, that's definitely a part of magic is learning how to steer the herd.
Yeah, that's also what I made as a comment in my book, that he was kind of laying his will upon the other by making him believe things about Eldermans that weren't actually true. But he didn't only do it with this person, he also did it with his family.
Okay.
He told his family that at the end of World War II, he was involved with the arrest of a very famous museum director, Dirk Hannema de Stuurs, who was collaborating with the Germans in World War II. And actually, I discovered that he couldn't have been near this museum director because he was arrested in Rotterdam. which is the western part of the Netherlands, and Eldermans was working for the tribunals in Almelo, the eastern part of the Netherlands. It's about approximately 150 miles apart from each other. And to be sure, I went to the archives and I got special permission to consult the tribunal files of Mr. Hannema de Stuurs, and I discovered that Eldermans actually never had anything to do with his arrest or his conviction or the sentencing of Mr. Hannema de Stuurs. But I have also found 3 people that all claim, apart from each other, that he was involved in the arrest.
Huh. That's interesting, because I think that happens. You know, you saying that makes me think of a couple other situations. There has been claims of some of the things that Aleister Crowley had said in his history that were not able to be verified, though other people say, you know, are. And then the same thing with Carlos Castaneda, who wrote about the adventures of Don Juan and the Toltec magic of Mexico, where he would claim to be in the desert with Don Juan and talking about these amazing adventures and lessons that he learned. But then there was other people that said at that day and time he was in the library in America somewhere. But then other people said, no, he was in the desert. He was there. We seen him. So it's very interesting that, you know, there's almost this paradox of people being in 2 places at one time, these authors, and it's a lot of times not able to be verified one way or another. And I think it just adds to the mystery of the whole thing.
Well, there's another thing that's about Eldermans, because a lot of people told me that every time they went by his house, they could see him sitting at the window drawing or writing, or at least doing something like that. So there was a lot of doubt that he actually went out of the house to do something with magic or something else. But during my research, I came across letters by his daughter, Louise, to Bob Richel, his son-in-law. When Louise gave birth to her daughter, she lived for a year with her parents in The Hague. And Bob lived in Amsterdam, and there he went to work. And in the weekends, he traveled to The Hague to be with his wife and daughter and to stay with his in-laws. And in those letters, I came across that Eldermans was suddenly going away at night. And he was acting kind of strange for his doing. He was humming and singing, and he wanted to wear a suit and his tie and not a sweater as he usually wanted. He was doing all kinds of things that weren't really like him. So his daughter said, "Oh, I think I know it. He has a girlfriend somewhere else." And now there is this strange thing that I discovered in the Swiss Eldermans files. He was at a certain time collecting information about what we call SM kelders, basements where mistresses are performing sadomasochistic sexual not as much magic, but just sadomasochistic sex. And suddenly I came across the house address of Monique van Kleef. I don't know if you are familiar with her.
The name sounds familiar.
Yeah, she had in Newark a brothel for sadomasochistic sex. And that has become quite a sensational trial in the United States, because she also had a very large clientele of politicians and
yes,
senators.
that's why it does sound familiar. Okay, no, I do know what you're talking about.
Yeah. And at one time she left the United States, and then she got back to The Hague, where Eldermans lived. And she started to practice her mistress business over there. And there you are with Mr. Eldermans, and then suddenly you come across a lot of notes on sadomasochistic sex. in his works, and I was thinking that he was when he actually went out of the house, he went to such ladies to have himself straightened out.
Well, it's funny because you got to wonder, like I said already, where he found the time to write, 20,000 pages worth of manuscripts, research, the time to really dive into those subject matters as a lifetime. But on top of that, he's seen drawing illustrations in his kitchen table by neighbors and by people passing by. At nighttime, he's going out and exploring and having, some wild times. He lived quite an interesting and double life, and it seems like he had his hand in a lot of different areas. His reach was vast, I guess you could say.
Yeah, it was. We also know that he was not the kind of faithful husband like other people sometimes are. I found letters of his wife to a friend of hers in which she actually candidly described their marriage, and it wasn't something she was very proud of. She knew in 1935 already that Eldermans was having girlfriends on the side. And yet they stayed married. I have pictures of their 50th wedding anniversary. But we also know that his girlfriend was actually living with him and his wife.
Oh, wow.
So it was a very, very weird situation.
Yeah, that's very interesting.
Yeah, even if you start looking into it, to a lot of people who knew them, it was normal. They didn't know better, but he was living there with two women.
Sounds like he really kind of sculpted his life exactly the way that he wanted. I mean, researching what he wanted, doing what he wanted, when he wanted, how he wanted. Yeah, I mean, whether a good thing or bad thing, it's a shame that his wife had to put up with that. But when you look at it from that standpoint, I mean, he truly took reign over his life and took the reins and ran with it and did exactly what he wanted.
It gave his wife also a lot of freedom. She also claimed that in her letters that he couldn't claim her anymore, so she had the freedom to do what she wanted, and well, she did.
Well, that's good then. Yeah, at least she got some freedom out of the matter, because I'm sure that was a hard situation. So, no, very, very interesting.
Politically active. She was in the city council of Almelo from 1940 to 1943, and after that from 1947 to 1949.
Oh, wow.
They moved to The Hague. Yeah, there she didn't find the time anymore, because by that time she was already a grandmother. It was also expected from her that she was going to do the household, because Elderman's girlfriend Dini was working for the Dutch railways. Eldermans was working for the probation council in The Hague. Yeah, she was the only one left to cook and clean, which
okay.
she regretted it very much, because when she lived in Almelo, she found her life more useful compared to the time she was living in The Hague. But on the other hand, she also went with she was very active for the Social Democratic Party in the Netherlands. And in The Hague, she was very into getting women to educate themselves. So she was very active with that. And by the time of 1955, she was trying to get a job with the Social Democratic Party to get more involved with feminist activities in the Netherlands. So, yeah, she tried to make something of her life, but sometimes life was against her.
No, it sounds like at least she got those pockets of time where she was able to get a little bit of freedom before it was taken away. Again, that is a shame, but at least there was some light in the dark lining there. So before we jump any further, I do want to give my shout out to my second sponsor, and then we're going to come back, talk a little bit about the Gnome Manuscript, and then we'll close out for the evening. But we want to go ahead and talk about Goetic Impressions. Goetic Impressions formed as a partnership between Ben, who is Frater Adamastro, and Sor Alara, with the intention to bring ritual-accurate magical tools to the public for affordable prices. One of the largest barriers to entry for new practitioners looking to experiment with the magic of Western grimoires is how expensive and difficult to find real ritual tools are. They first launched with a Kickstarter to bring their Goetic medallions to life, and since then have also expanded with an Enochian toolset, and most recently a Satanic medallion and altar set, which is currently live on Kickstarter. With over 20 years of magical and occult experiences across a range of traditions, Goetic Impressions is the place to find affordable, high-quality ritual items. I will stand behind them 100%. I have a Goetic mat from them that I use for my Solomonic practices. It has been, I've made my own over the years, but it's an easy way to have one that you can roll up, put in the corner. You don't have to fight with all the materials. It makes it, I don't want to say easy because I don't ever like to take the easy way out, but it does make it easy and it's nice. I do have altar cloths from them. I have candles. I have other things. So they're items I stand behind 100%, and they are very powerful as well. You can check them out at www.goeticimpressions.com. Again, that is goeticimpressions.com. And if you're looking for a promo code to get 10% off your overall order, I'm going to mess with you a little bit. I'm not going to give it to you right now. If you want it, you're interested, you find me on Knights of the Nephilim on Facebook, or message me at celestialoddities@gmail.com. Show that you want to put a little work in to get that 10% off, and I'll certainly hook you up with a 10% off promo code. But check them out, Goetic Impressions, and once again, also love to our other sponsor, Limitless Liberation. So I want to finish up the interview for the last section here to talk obviously about, once you got your hand on Elderman's, manuscripts and his different workings, one of the big pieces of the multiple sections of magic and things that he talked about was about gnomes. And I find it very interesting that not only did you write a book from this, I should say, in the process of putting out a 3-part book on this, which the first has already released, the second is shortly to come, and the third one you said will be in the near future. Why don't you tell us a little bit about why you chose this specific thing, and what is some of the most fascinating things you found about this research?
Why the gnomes was because the Museum of Witchcraft and Magic at the time was very interested in what the Gnome Manuscript was about. So I took that upon me and started to look into his gnome research. But first of all, we have to take into consideration that Eldermans already researched gnomes in the 1920s. He learned about gnomes from a couple of people that he met during his vacations in Nunspeet. And there was this old Mr. Zwakenberg, who was the supplier of fuels, and he had contact with gnomes that were in the forest surrounding the village. And there was this other gentleman, Mr. Van Dam, who also saw gnomes. And instead of thinking those people are crazy, Eldermans thought, let me be the silent listener, and I will not judge. I will not condemn. I will just hear what they have to say and see what I will do with it. Then he left those researches for a while, and in 1938 he started to pick them up again by having a map of the Netherlands and just making small dots on it where gnomes were seen. And from that emerged an image that there was a kind of a migration route through the Netherlands going to Scandinavia. And from that point on, he was actually hooked and started to collect more stories about gnomes. But the funny thing is that Eldermans finds stories about gnomes in parts of the Netherlands where there is no gnome folklore, like Twente in the eastern part, near the German border. You can find tales there about white women, about giants, about dwarves, but no gnomes. Very typical. And the part in the Netherlands where the most gnome tales are can be found, Limburg, Brabant, Zeeland, the south part of the Netherlands. He just has 3-4 notes in his entire manuscript about it. But if you go look into the areas over there, it is overwhelming. And another fun fact is that those areas are also the areas where there are a lot of archaeological finds of Celtic origin. So I started thinking maybe the artifacts of Celtic origin and the gnome tales are somehow connected. But I'm still in the process of going into that part of gnome folklore in the Netherlands. Eldermans, on the other hand, has found a large number of gnome tales in Twente, but also in the region of Nunspeet. And there are a few regions where he said the gnome activity was quite high. And also, he never mentions gnomes as flesh and blood creatures, or the pygmy theory, as we call it. He only speaks about gnomes as spirits. They emerge from a mist or a haze, and they disappear in a mist or a haze. And another thing that he discovered was that gnomes actually seem indifferent to us. They don't even know we are there watching them, or they do know, but they don't care. And there are also the tales that he has written down about people who met gnomes and regret to have met them, because gnomes, they can be quite a nuisance when you rub them the wrong way. Those kind of things. When you go look into the magic concerning gnomes, there is only one ritual from a grimoire that we know, from the Keys of Solomon, where you call in the aid of a gnome when you are going to dig for treasure. But most of the magic that he has discovered is from folklore or even oral traditions.
That's very interesting, because when most people think of gnomes, I think it's automatically programmed into us to automatically think of them as a flesh being, as a real life, being in front of us. They don't, or at least I hadn't in past thought of them as a spiritual being that can either just kind of come and go as they please out of a mist, or even, as you said in the Keys of Solomon, be summoned through ritual to appear in front of you. I don't think most people think of that aspect of it. So it brings a whole new idea to what gnomes really are and what kind of powers they possess. So it's interesting that not only could that be the case, but as you said, they are indifferent to us. They almost are not on the same frequency as us. They either don't see us or they don't care, because they're operating in their own space, and we're just kind of there, a part of it. And if you do happen to catch their attention or annoy them, then, as you said, it might turn into a very bad situation for you. So that is fascinating, because I, for one, certainly believe that they exist and can exist. With the things I've seen over the years in my paranormal research to my ritual work, I have, like I said before earlier in the episode, seen just a slew of things that are impossible, or what seem to be impossible are certainly possible. So why couldn't they? So it's interesting that he put so much time into that work, which then has transpired into you being able to put out this wonderful work, not only on the first book, but we still have 2 more to come. So anyone listening out there, make sure you pick up the book. Be anxious and waiting for number 2 and 3 to come out. The illustrations, real quick, a side note, the illustrations in Elderman's work, those were from himself for the most part?
Yeah.
Because they're fascinating. They're beautiful pieces.
he was a very talented illustrator. But if you look at his work, he is more of a. Today we have a computer and we copy and paste the picture, and Eldermans was that in an analog form. He found such pictures in books, and then he copied it himself in his own style, in his own hand. He copied the picture. He was very skilled in making ideograms, pentacles, amulets himself from the symbols that he found in the books that he consulted. And there should be, I think, a gray area of literature that he has consulted. Or he is a very imaginative man that he can make all those things up himself. But yeah, I don't know. I still hope that there is some manuscript that I will discover in a collection where I can say, that's where he's got it from. Or maybe better, some undiscovered work from Eldermans, which should be out there, because if you see what Bob Richel has owned over the years and what has been sold over the years and what we have found, there are still pages missing. So I do hope, and if someone is listening out there and has some of the Eldermans collection that has been auctioned somewhere in the 1980s of the previous century, please contact me, because I really want to see it.
No, absolutely. If anyone out there has it or knows anyone who does, has any connections that can help Wilmar out in this research and in this writing, that would be amazing. I think the synchronicities have lined themselves up over the years for you step by step. They don't always come together as we hope they do. They come at their own time, their own pace, but they line themselves up to make things happen. And I think so far from everything you've told me that has been the case for your research and your releases so far. So that hidden gem that you're waiting for could fall into your lap at any moment. And I pray and cross my fingers that it does, because I would love to see this research come to fruition fully. It's already going to produce 3 amazing books, or I guess 4 books you could say. But I would love that hidden gem to fall in your lap to really piece together some of those hidden questions.
Well, I'm still in planning 2 more books on the Eldermans materials, so there's still more to come.
Absolutely awesome. I can't wait. That was actually one of the questions I was going to ask you. So we can expect some more things in the future, which the fans, I think, certainly will be excited for. We are running close to time here. So before we wrap up, Wilmar, why don't you tell us 2 things? Who it is that you would like to thank for your progression so far in your writings, as far as helping you with your work and getting to where you are. And then secondly, where we can check you out at as far as your social pages, your email that people can reach out to you. Just give us a little bit of both of those, if you would.
Okay. Well, there are a few people that really are high up the ranks for getting thanked for all their work. The wonderful staff of the Museum of Witchcraft and Magic in Boscastle in England. If you are if you are able to go there, please do, because it is a very, very well decorated and very informative museum. And the staff is wonderful. Joyce, Hannah, Simon, really great people to work with. René Schurte from the Zentralbibliothek in Zurich, who has been very kind to open up on days that they were actually closed. So that's also a very great. And I would like to commemorate Jeanette Richel, the granddaughter of Mr. Eldermans, who recently passed away at the age of 65. And she made a lot of things possible for me to have this career, only because of the ongoing permission to use the works of her grandfather and father for my writings now and in the future.
Oh, that's a wonderful list, and I mean, I'm glad that these people were able to make this happen for you, because it's sometimes people going that extra mile, opening the doors on days they're closed, giving access to things that might not help you in your life, but could help someone else in their career, as obviously his granddaughter has done for you. That is amazing, because look what it has spawned, look what it has turned into, and what it still will be bringing down the road with the release, as you said, of 4 more books roughly. That's amazing. That's truly, magnificent to see what one spark can build into. It just takes one spark to build a fire. So that's awesome. So thank you so much for your work and everything that you have released. I am fascinated by it, and I look forward to the future releases. Why don't you tell us where we can check you out on your social platforms, and what email people can reach out to you with any questions or needing to get a hold of you, and then we'll go ahead and wrap up.
Well, first of all, I would like to say that there's another book of me coming about Bob Richel. It's called Mandrake and Gallowman, The Occult Life of Bob Laurentius Richel. It's coming out on Troy Books, so keep an eye out on that. And you can find me on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and I'm very approachable, so please drop me a line when you are able, and I will get back to you as soon as I can. And yeah, that's about it, I think.
Well, no, that's perfect. I really, once again, want to thank you for coming on tonight to talk with us, to share with us your knowledge and your research. It's been fascinating. It's been a great conversation, and I hope to definitely have you, on the show again down the road. Other than that, folks, make sure you tune in all of the future episodes that we have coming up. We have a lot of great guests. Next week, we have John Vermillion coming on to talk about his books, Asaya Chailuxa, as a book that I've been personally diving into recently that is magnificent as far as some reaching your higher self. And the Stargate of Christ is his other book, and certainly a lot of great working. So we're going to be talking about those and much more to come. Right now, I think we are booked into April of next year. So if you're loving the show, you're liking what you're hearing with our guests, know that there is a lot more episodes to come. Make sure you jump back through our past episodes. But other than that, we do want to thank you for listening in tonight. As I said before, click the like, share, and follow button. Share it around to your family and friends. Hit us up at celestialoddities@gmail.com for any questions or concerns. And other than that, Wilmar, I want to thank you so much for coming on the show tonight.
Thank you for having me. It was really enjoyable.
Absolutely. Well, you have a wonderful rest of your evening, and we'll talk again soon.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Take care. And everyone out there, have a wonderful night. Knights of the Nephilim, Freighter Crow. We'll see you next time. And we're fading out.